Hey y'all, so if you can't tell, I am a Texan. How many of you in this room today are native Texans? All right. I actually grew up, you too can be a professional speaker. I grew up in Euless, right down the road here. I actually still live in Euless. Other than my time away in the military, that is where I've called home until recently, and we're getting ready to make our way across the border into the Northern Territory known as Oklahoma. Everybody, yeah, I'm a little verklempt over that if you want. I know that's a whole other word. But anyway, back in the 80s, I became one of the 1%. You know what the 1% is? I was one of those that became a military veteran. I joined the Navy. I went in, I scored really high on my ASVAB test, and I became an aviation electrician because Top Gun had just come out. Come on, I wanted to work with all the planes, right? I've been an aviation buff for a long time, but that was part of why I wanted to be a part of Top Gun and part of aviation. And I joined as a recruit and just really was excited about what was in store for me. About a year into that, I became a part of another statistic. It was part of 66% of the women in the military that year that were sexually harassed. And when I say sexually harassed, that's a pretty term. It's like calling postpartum depression baby blues, all right? What happened to me was not pretty. And it was something that left a bent in me for a long time. So as I'm standing there, my senior chief had me go meet with a female officer. And I'm standing there, my arm in a sling, bruises all over my body, jaw wired shut. And this female officer looked at me and said, "You're not going to ruin a good Marine's career over this, are you?" So I retreated. I retreated back into myself. I began doing some of the things that Terry Lee talked about earlier. I began being promiscuous, focused on perfectionism. If I couldn't please everybody, I wasn't pleasing anybody. I was unloving of myself, and therefore nobody else could really love me because I wasn't even willing to show anybody else who I was. I had a great little saying. I would say, "I'm an open book, you can ask me anything." What I was really saying was, yeah, but if you really knew me, you wouldn't have to ask. There's a lot of power to the words and the phrases we use. Wasn't too long after that, I found myself pregnant and then in a shotgun wedding in West Virginia. So yes, I've married a West Virginian. And I've really thought and fought really hard over these next few minutes that I want to share with you today about whether or not I was going to share it. Have you ever wrestled with God with, is this really the right audience to share this with? I mean, we're here for business, right? But I really feel that a lot of our personal stuff impacts all of our being. We are not a woman only. We are not a mom only. We are not a business person only. We are all encompassing. So, 2003, my husband decides to leave and go to Florida to live with his mom and work on some stuff. And he wasn't leaving us, but he was leaving us, right? And I had 3 young kids, and I packed on the weight. I gained 80 pounds in like 3 months. I didn't know what was going on. I was struggling. I was going to my doctor. I was pleading with my doctor. Where's my functional medicine? I was pleading with my doctor. We're not a functional medicine doctor. And I was screaming at him, something is wrong, something is wrong. Listen to me, something is wrong. Ladies, you know your body. You know your body better than any person you're sitting across from. Listen to those cues. Because what was happening then, even though I didn't have a history of it in my family, is I was having adrenal burnout. I was having cortisol levels going through the roof because that trauma that had happened to me when I retreated had never been dealt with. Fast forward another 10 years. My daughter comes home from college to tell us that she's pregnant. And I understand this call because I made it to my own parents. So as my husband's heaping words over her saying, Allie, this doesn't change how we love you. It doesn't change your status in our family. It doesn't change your value to the world. He's saying the words I had wanted my parents to say to me. Yeah. And being a talker, and not just a public speaker, but a talker, my daughter said, Mom, you're being awful quiet. I said, yeah, I am, Allie. I said, because when a girl finds out she's pregnant, one of 3 words goes through her brain. Adoption, abortion, or acceptance. And I need to know what word you're parked on right now. And she goes, oh, I'm keeping this baby. I said, congratulations. You just made your first parenting decision. And from this moment forward, we are celebrating this child, this pregnancy, and we are stepping forward in complete healing, right? Little did I know that that was healing for me because I don't remember ever being told congratulations for any of my 3 children. Because, once I got pregnant out of wedlock, there was a sin on all of them, right? So I asked her, I said, my friend Amy has a nonprofit called Embrace Grace. Yeah, y'all know Embrace Grace? Embrace Grace. Baby changes everything, right? Embrace Grace makes the church a safe place for women with unplanned pregnancies to land. It's a great ministry that was born out of our church. It's fabulous. And I said, do you want me to reach out to Amy and see if she has room in one of her classes for you? She goes, yes, please. Amy messaged me back immediately. Just one word. Congratulations. I laid my head on that desk that day and sobbed for 15 minutes or longer. Because in that one word, she had broken off generations of shame. Not just from me, not just from my daughter, but from my mother too, because I was an unplanned pregnancy myself. So I know I said we're all here about business, but this all comes into play. Fast forward to Allie's had the twins. Oh yeah, did I mention they ended up being 2? Boy-girl twins. We call them the dictator duo because they rule my life. And anyway, the dictator duo arrived and I took some time off. I took a sabbatical because, I needed to do my diva duties because that is my grandma's name. And a friend asked me to go to her conference. And I said, I'm on sabbatical. See, I'd run conferences that had 4,000 people in them. I'd run conferences that had 300 people in them. I'd been running conferences for people, and I just knew anybody that asked me to come to a conference wanted me to help. And by the way, Terry Lee did not ask me to help. I volunteered today because I love doing that part, all right? But when I said, I'm on sabbatical, she goes, oh, whoa. She goes, I'm just asking you to attend. She goes, it's in January. I said, oh, then I can come because, I'm off of sabbatical in December. She goes, all right. So I go. About 3 days before it, I said, hey, are y'all doing a tag board? Remember? Okay, hashtags when they were brand new, they had the tag board up on the screen and you could take a picture and hashtag it and put it up there. And she's like, no, what's that? So I explained it to her. And I go and I explain to the MC that day about what a hashtag is. And she goes, a hash brown? I'm like, no, a hashtag. It's going to help us keep track of what people are saying on social media. She goes, I really don't get it. And they're like, Angie, can you go up on stage and explain it? Little secret, I stepped off the stage in high school. I had not been on a stage in high school since my drama instructor had told me, young lady, as long as you sound like a hick, you'll never amount to anything. So my answer was like, do I have to? And they're like, yeah, we think it would be good. You've got the humor for it. You can really play it off, take a picture, talk about her calling it a hash brown, you calling it a hashtag. And so we go up there and do it. I make the announcement. And as I make the announcement, I go off the stage, and the MC goes, all right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for worship. And she comes and sits down, about where you're at, right there. And I hear the voice on the stage go, wow, is that how a guy gets introduced at a women's conference? We have about 500 women there. And he was kind of tongue-in-cheek, but he was also underwriting the conference. So he was kind of, and I turned around, and it happened to be the man that the soundtrack of my life was written from, Al Denson. And he was on keyboards. And I said, I got this. And out of instinct, I jumped back on stage, and I said, young ladies, if you want to be taken to the throne room and hear God's plan and purpose for your life, you need to tune in, let go of everything that God's brought you here for today, and put your phones down and tune in. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't eloquent, it was just blah, 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 blah. But it was intentional, heartfelt. I stepped off. Al was in tears. I didn't think anything about it. The next day he comes in and he goes, you're running the show from here on out. You're the new MC. You're doing this. He goes, where do you speak? I said, I don't. And he looks at my friend. He goes, where does she speak? She goes, she doesn't. She hasn't spoken since high school. And he said, there is a plan and a purpose. He goes, and when you stepped on that stage last night and said what you said, you reclaimed that plan and purpose. So it's time for you to repurpose what God has called you to. So I help authors and speakers tell their story and market themselves and promote themselves and get their stories out there. But I do it from a place of helping others work through that gunk that's holding them back. Because we all have that little voice in us that says, I'm not good enough, I'll never be good enough, or I wish I could, but I just can't. And instead, he's saying, I have redeemed you. I have recruited you. Do not retreat. Reclaim your life. Release yourself in what you've been repurposed for, because you are redeemed. So I want to thank you all. That is mainly what I had not planned to talk to y'all about today. But that is what God felt I needed to tell you. So